Now we're going to talk about revolvers. Revolvers are a type of handgun that is so named because they have a cylinder here that pops out and revolves. Each time you press the trigger, it revolves, allowing a new chamber to be lined up with the firing pin. So let's talk about the nomenclature or parts of a revolver. Some of the parts of the revolver are the grip, sometimes called the handle, but it's actually called the grip. There's the back strap up top here. There is the trigger guard that obviously keeps the trigger from being touched. Then there is the trigger itself. Then we have the frame, which is the main part of this weapon, the metal part, the frame. Down here is the barrel. The tip of the barrel, right at the end of it, is referred to as the muzzle. You'll also see that we've got this little post here that's called a front sight. And then a little trough in the back, kind of a U shape, that makes up the rear sights. Additionally, we have the cylinder, the part we talked about that revolves. We have on this side a cylinder release latch. You press this cylinder release latch to allow that cylinder to pop open. Inside of the cylinder are multiple chambers, the ones where the bullets go. And then you have your ejector rod. This ejector rod, when pressed, causes the ejector star to come out. So down here is the ejector star. This takes the rims of any casings that have expanded in there during firing from the heat, and it helps to pop them out. It pulls them out of the chambers. So those are the basic parts of a revolver. Now, to see how a revolver operates, we strongly encourage you to download the flash file that shows operation of a revolver so you have a better understanding of it, and it's kind of fun too. Now we're going to talk about how to load and unload a revolver. So first, let's talk about loading a revolver. To load a revolver, what we want to first do is we want to obtain our master grip, we call it. Our master grip is where we have our strong hand touching the weapon with our finger indexed on the frame of the gun. Remember, we don't want that finger anywhere around the trigger guard or trigger. We want to index firmly on the frame of the weapon. Now when we're doing this, we're then going to roll the gun over here, and you'll see I've got the cylinder release latch that we talked about. Now the cylinder release latch, it can operate in a number of ways. On some it pushes forward, some it pulls back, some it goes down, some it goes up, and some it actually pushes in. It all depends on the model of the gun that you have. This particular one pushes forward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my strong thumb here as a right-handed shooter. I'm going to use my strong thumb to activate that cylinder release latch. Once I do, I'm going to take my support hand, my left hand, and I'm going to make it in a shape like this, my two middle fingers together, my index finger and my pinky both outside. I'm going to come underneath of the trigger, and I'm going to let those two middle fingers come through, all the way through. Watch how I do this. I'm going to come all the way through that cylinder, and I'm going to push it open. I can then let go of this weapon with my strong hand. You'll notice I've got a good grip on it here, just with my support hand. You see that my pinky and my index finger, they do a good job supporting it with my two middle fingers pushed all the way through. Finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to wrap my thumb around the cylinder to meet those two middle fingers. So it should look something like this. Now, sometimes on some of these, the cylinder is quite large and it's impossible to get all the way around. So you just want to bring them together as much as you can. In this particular one, though, I can get them actually all the way around. So I'm going to come all the way around them. Now, what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to tilt my muzzle down. I'm going to point it down at the ground. The reason why I'm doing this is I'm using gravity as my friend. So I'm going to let gravity help me load these dummy rounds. You see I'm not using live rounds. I'm using dummy rounds here. They are incapable of firing. And I'm going to put them into the chamber one at a time. So I'll just put it in. And then I can use my thumb and finger to rotate it. Put another one in. Thumb and finger rotates it. Put another one in, and I can go so on and so on. I can just put a couple in, or I can put them all in, whatever I want. Once I've got as many in as I want, I am then going to get my master grip again. I'm going to have that finger Notice that finger's off the weapon on the frame there. And I'm going to slowly remove my two middle fingers. I've got my master grip again. I'm going to let my hand rest on the gun like this as my thumb comes up and pushes that cylinder closed and rotates it slightly. Notice it has to rotate slightly to close. So I'm going to just push it in there and rotate it till it's closed and locked in place. Now you can see it's locked in there nice and tight. I now have my revolver loaded, ready to go. From here, all I need to do is press the trigger and rounds should come out if I've put them in the chambers where I wanted them. Now let's talk about how to unload this weapon as a right-handed shooter. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to, again, go through the same steps, master grip. We're going to push in with that strong thumb on that cylinder release latch. My two middle fingers are going to come underneath of the trigger guard through that cylinder, allow the gun to rest in my hand, wrap those fingers around. I'm then going to tilt the gun straight up. We call this checking the time on your watch because that's kind of the motion you make. You want to make sure you're not waving it around at people at the range. You want it to go from here to a straight up position, and you'll see the rounds all fall out. Now, if they didn't all fall out, what I can do is I use the meat of my strong hand to tap that ejector rod. And by doing so, I can force them out. So I would tap the ejector rod. Be careful not to put your hand over the top of the barrel. So you just want it like that. And that's how you would unload the revolver with a right-handed shooter. So you point down to load, straight up to unload a revolver. Now we're going to talk about how to load and unload the revolver for a left-handed shooter. Now obviously for a left-handed shooter, there's some challenges with many handguns because, let's face it, handguns are generally designed for right-handed shooters. There are some exceptions out there, but in general, that's what a left-handed shooter is going to have to be struggling with. So we're going to teach you the techniques to handle this as a left-handed shooter. If you're a left-handed shooter, what you're going to do is get your master grip on the weapon, like we talked about, finger on the frame of the weapon there, holding onto it with your strong hand, your left hand now, since you're a left-handed shooter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring our trigger finger up. And that trigger finger coming up is going to access that cylinder release latch. From here, we're going to do sort of the same thing, except we're just going to use our thumb and our fingers instead of using the fingers and then the thumb like we did. We're going to push through the cylinder with the thumb by coming up underneath with our hand, and then while we're accessing that cylinder release latch, push through with the thumb. Notice the thumb comes all the way through. And then we're going to wrap our fingers around just like we did for a right-handed shooter so that I've got a nice little grip there. I'm going to tilt the weapon down. I'm going to take my dummy rounds and I'm going to insert them in. And I can just move it with my thumb as I go. And I put as many in as I want. Once I'm all done, I'm going to again obtain that master grip, finger off the trigger on the frame. So you can see I'm putting it on the frame there. I'm then going to slowly remove my right hand, my support hand in this case, and I'm going to come up and close it shut and rotate it with my hand here, with my support hand. So again, I'm going to just come up and rotate it shut with that hand. From here, again, I just press the trigger and I should have rounds ready to go. Now when I'm ready to unload, I again do the same steps. Master grip, finger off the trigger. I'm going to bring my thumb up underneath, kind of a trough shape here. You see I've got kind of a trough going on. I'm going to come up with my thumb. I'm going to access with my trigger finger the cylinder release latch, push all the way through with my thumb, wrap those fingers around, and then I'm going to check the time on my watch, tilting straight up. You see all the rounds come out, tap with the meat of my hand, my strong hand, if I need to get more out. They all came out, I'm completely unloaded.